Imagine a world where the map simply ends. For thousands of years, brilliant civilizations thrived in total isolation. An entire empire in the Americas could rise and fall, knowing absolutely nothing of a kingdom in Europe. The vast oceans of our planet weren't highways. They were absolute, terrifying barriers. Between the 1400s and 1600s, in the span of just a few generations, everything changed. Daring explorers sailed into the unknown and shattered those barriers, connecting continents that had been separated for millennia. New trade routes were forged out of thin air, reshaping empires, exploding economies, and merging cultures forever. But this unprecedented era of discovery carried a heavy, devastating price. It brought conquest, colonization, and a ruthless global competition that would alter the fate of millions. This is the story of the age of exploration, the exact moment the world became connected. To understand why this era even began, we have to look at what Europe was suddenly lacking. For centuries, the legendary Silk Road had been the vital artery connecting Europe to the immense wealth of Asia. We're talking about spices that were worth their weight in gold, luxurious silks and precious gems. But in 1453, a seismic event shook the medieval world, the fall of Constantinople. When the Ottoman Empire took control of the city, they effectively bottlenecked the traditional overland trade routes. Tariffs skyrocketed. The old paths became dangerous and impossibly expensive. Europe was effectively cut off from the wealth of the East. They were desperate. The monarchs of Spain, Portugal, and later England and France realized a hard truth. If they couldn't go through the East, they had to find a completely new path. They had to take to the unknown waters. The race was officially on. The push into the open ocean required immense risk, and two specific voyages would completely rewrite the map of the world. In 1492, an Italian navigator named Christopher Columbus pitched a radical idea to the Spanish crown. Instead of sailing south around Africa to reach Asia, he would sail west, straight across the terrifying, uncharted expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Columbus believed the world was much smaller than it actually was. When they finally hit land, he thought he had reached the Indies. In reality, he had stumbled upon an entirely new hemisphere, the Americas. Meanwhile, Portugal was aggressively pushing south. In 1498, Vasco da Gama achieved what many thought was impossible. He navigated his fleet down the brutal, storm-battered coast of Africa, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and became the first European to reach India by sea. In less than a decade, the world had become drastically smaller. The monopolies of the old overland routes were broken forever. But this was only the beginning. If Columbus and da Gama expanded the map, Ferdinand Magellan proved its true, terrifying dimensions. In 1519, Magellan set out with a fleet of 5 ships under the Spanish flag. His goal? To find a western sea route to the wealthy spice islands of Indonesia. What followed was a journey of unimaginable hardship. They navigated the treacherous, freezing straits at the bottom of South America, a passage we now call the Strait of Magellan, and entered an ocean so vast and deceivingly calm that he named it the Pacific. But the Pacific was a blue desert. They sailed for months without seeing land. Starvation and scurvy decimated his crew. Men ate rats, sawdust, and the leather from their own rigging just to survive. Magellan himself wouldn't make it. He was killed in a conflict in the Philippines. Yet, in 1522, a single, battered ship named the Victoria limped back into a Spanish harbour. Out of the 270 men who began the journey, only 18 returned. But they had done it. They completed the first circumnavigation of the Earth. They proved unequivocally that the entire planet could be navigated completely by sea. With the sea routes fully established, the true impact of the age of exploration took hold, the birth of a global economy. For the first time in human history, a continuous web of trade linked the continents, and the engine driving this massive new economy was silver. Vast amounts of silver mined from the Americas flowed across the oceans. It was used to buy the highly coveted spices of India and the luxurious silks and porcelains of China. We saw the rise of the Manila galleons, massive treasure ships connecting Asia, the Americas and Europe in an endless loop of wealth. Plants, animals and technologies were exchanged in what we now call the Columbian Exchange. Tomatoes, potatoes and corn went to Europe and Asia, fundamentally changing global diets. Horses, coffee and wheat came to the Americas. A new, heavily interconnected global machine had been turned on. But we cannot talk about the age of exploration without confronting its deepest shadows. This was not just an era of discovery, it was an era of conquest. When European ships arrived on new shores, they brought more than just trade goods. They brought advanced weapons, an insatiable hunger for land, and invisible killers. Diseases like smallpox decimated indigenous populations who had no natural immunity. Entire civilizations, like the mighty Aztecs and the Incas, collapsed under the combined weight of European conquest and apocalyptic plagues. The overwhelming demand for labor to extract wealth from these new colonies led to one of history's greatest tragedies, the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of African men, women and children were stolen from their homelands and forced into brutal, lifelong bondage to fuel this new global economy. The age of exploration reshaped the world, yes, but it did so at a staggering, horrific cost. It was a time of immense human achievement, matched directly by immense human suffering. Looking back at those turbulent centuries between 1400 and 1600, it's hard to comprehend the sheer scale of the change. In a historical blink of an eye, the absolute barriers of the oceans were turned into global highways. For the first time in history, every single continent became part of the exact same global system. Economies became intertwined, cultures collided and merged. The profound isolation of the ancient world was gone forever. The age of exploration eventually ended, but the modern globalized world it created had just begun, and the world would never be the same again.